Be here with you. Welcome. Whether you're here for the first time or you've been here a few times, or maybe you're long-termers, you're always welcome, and we're honored and so appreciative to have you here with us tonight. So thank you for being here. In our tradition, if you remember, if you were here for my talk last time, we spoke about how important appreciation and gratitude is in our tradition. And so one of our practices is to always thank our teachers, the long lineages of teachers that we have in our spiritual philosophy, but also all the many teachers that we have in our life, whether that's our mother or teachers in school. We have so many gurus in our life. So we always want to begin by doing that. And I'll just say as one of the simple prayers that we have in relationship to that principle. And then we have it also in English. So as we say it in English, it's a nice time for you to reflect in your heart on the many teachers that the Lord has sent your way. Om Jnana Timarandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militamina Tashmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master has opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. So has anyone ever woken up feeling like a champion ready to conquer the world, and then the next day you can barely drag yourself out of bed and you just want to eat carbs and doom scroll on TikTok? Ever had those ups and downs in your life? Or maybe you work with people where one of your coworkers is really calm and peaceful and brings a wonderful mood to your workplace, while another is always in a state of high anxiety and stressful ambition. And the third one is, well, let's just admit it, is just completely checked out in this world. We probably have one of each of those in our own family, or we've met people like that, or maybe we felt like that at different parts of our life. Well, these aren't random moods, but they're actually the effects of a profound spiritual science about how this world works. And this is described most especially in the Bhagavad Gita, one of our books of scripture, but also in our other scriptures as well. And these three modes of material nature that we're going to look at tonight are called gunas. And sometimes that word gunas is translated as ropes. So you can think about them as powerful energies that are existing in this material world in which we live that can bind us. And they're often these energies of goodness, passion, and ignorance are pulling the strings of our lives in many ways. And so our aim is to become spiritual scientists, to be keen observers of our own consciousness, and learn how to disentangle ourselves from these three energies. Our ultimate aim, of course, is that we would transcend these three modes of material nature to reach a state of pure goodness, uninterrupted spiritual bliss. That's our real eternal state. And this whole process is also deeply personal, because ultimately our aim is to reconnect with our supreme source, Lord Sri Krishna, our eternal shelter, who we've been disconnected from. And we've ended up in this material world conditioned by these energies because we wanted to enjoy this world apart from him, or just enjoy in general apart from him. Now, this topic is a huge topic, and we know we only have a few minutes on Sunday. So trying to talk about the three modes of material nature in a 25, 30-minute talk is like trying to put the ocean in a little sand pail. So what we can only do here is really touch the tip of the iceberg. And so I hope it will whet your appetite to look into this topic more completely. In the Bhagavad Gita especially, there's an entire chapter, chapter 14, dedicated to the modes of material nature. And then the theme is picked up again in chapters 17 and 18, but it's really throughout the Gita. You'll see it in the purports and places like chapter 7, and then I think it even begins talking about the three modes as early as Bhagavad Gita chapter 3, so very early in Krishna's conversation with Arjuna. So we can only explore some of the facets of it, and if we have time during the question, maybe some of our senior teachers here can help us even go deeper into this topic. The fact that you're here on Sunday when you could be so many other places, to me, is a good indication that you're really trying to grow in your spiritual life, to deepen your relationship with God, and maybe to navigate this world of illusion in which we live, because we all have a sense, I think, that this is not our true home. And we want to find true knowledge. That is, we want to be able to distinguish from what is true and from what is false, between what is eternal and what is temporary, between what is permanent and what is illusory. But it can feel like we're trapped in a kind of virtual reality or a kind of game as we're trying to figure out how this world works. How many of you have ever played a board game that you don't know the rules to? It can be really difficult. You show up to a group of friends and they break out a board game that you've never played before, and everyone seems to know the rules but you. How do you feel in that kind of situation?
Lost.
Yeah, you feel lost. What are some other emotions you might have? Bewildered. Yeah, bad. You might feel angry. You might get withdrawn. You might tip over the board and stomp out. But when you really understand the rules, that game can be an experience that can become a really fun challenge and a joyful experience for you. And that's what we want to discover, is the rules for how this world works. Because it's our deepest nature is not to be conditioned in this way. So it's also reconnecting with our truest nature to understand. And it's one of the reasons why a big part of Krishna consciousness culture is distributing spiritual literature, because we want to help people discover the rules of the game, to have this transcendental knowledge, to understand how this world works. And we're not the only one that takes distribution of spiritual literature really seriously. Have you ever stayed in a hotel before and opened the little side table drawer next to your bed and found something inside the drawer? What do you find inside many, many hotels in the United States?
Bible.
Yeah, a Gideon Bible, exactly. So they're pretty serious about distributing spiritual literature. Does anyone have any idea how many Bibles the Gideons have distributed in hotel rooms and hospitals and nursing homes around the world?
Since the 1890s, you mean?
Yeah, since it began. I don't know. I know the Gideon, that at least the history I know, was starting when there was a lot of salesmen going into hotels. And so it really kind of ramped up in the early 20th century. 2.5 billion copies of the Bible or the New Testament they've distributed all over the world. So we're doing pretty good. I think the statistic I saw the other day was around 600 million pieces of spiritual literature in the International Society of Krishna Consciousness. So it's important for us to get the word out. Now, if you go to places like Utah, there's some stiff competition in the side drawer. When I pulled open the drawer there one day, I saw a Bible, a Bhagavad Gita, and a Book of Mormon. So the obvious recognition that the Gideons have is that there's people are spiritually seeking out there. They're looking for answers. And so I should also say that we have a special ministry in ISKCON called Hotel Gita or Motel Gita. And it has distributed over 1 million copies of the Bhagavad Gita in hotels in the United States. And many hotels and motels, if you go there, you'll see that they're often Indian owned. I think 1/3 of all motels in the United States are owned by Indian families. So they're more than open to having Gitas put in their room. And if you've ever opened up one of those Gitas, you'll notice at the very beginning of it, it gives you some advice. Has anyone ever opened up the beginning of a Gideon Bible? So it'll direct you to verses. For example, it'll say, if you're impatient, go to this verse. If you're angry about something, go look at these 2 verses. If you're struggling with temptation, that's the question you have. How do I deal with temptation? You can go to this verse. And then it said in the front of this Gideon Bible, if you're lonely, read Psalm 23. Does anyone know what Psalm 23 is off the top of your head? It's probably the most famous psalm for Christians. How does it begin?
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want.
Yes, exactly. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures beside still waters. He restores my soul. So the intention is you'd read through this Psalm 23, and then it would help you with your loneliness. And I remember at the time I was traveling about 200 days out of the year. So I was in a lot of hotels. And when I got to the bottom of reading Psalm 23, I noticed that someone had written a little question next to the verses of the Psalm. And it said, still lonely? Call Lola. Now, I noticed a couple guys got out your phones to take that number down. Don't call Lola, because even if you find good spiritual literature, you could have a bad teacher, right? Lola is not going to help you ultimately with your loneliness. So we need to have supreme teachers. Our founder, Acharya A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, is one of those supreme teachers in a long line of teachers. And his commentaries on the ancient Vedic scriptures, called purports, can unpack topics in the Bhagavad Gita for us, like the three modes of material nature, these gunas, and how they work. Not to mention the hundreds of recorded lectures that we have from Srila Prabhupada that touch upon this topic. So you want to have good teachers. And we have a special offer for you today, that if you don't own a copy of Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is, there's maybe one available for you tonight before you leave. And if you want to go deeper in that Bhagavad Gita that you're gifted, please come to our Bhagavad Gita class. It's every Tuesday night at 6 o'clock in Krishna Cove, and it's taught by our illustrious teacher. Is she here? Lalita Devi Dasi. And any devotee can direct you to many, many other online resources to go deeper, to really take advantage of all that Srila Prabhupada is teaching us in these commentaries. For example, the Bhagavad Gita is only 700 verses. So it's about the size of the Gospel of Mark, maybe like that if you just had the verses. So look how much instruction you're getting from Srila Prabhupada to understand this. And I remember the first time that I read Srila Prabhupada's Gita, not only did the story come alive for me, but the understanding of how this world works was so amazing to me. I remember thinking, how did I not see this before? And I felt like I breathed a big sigh of relief that I could finally begin to understand, wow, this is what's going on in this world. This is how material nature is working. I think we all have general senses of how there's principles of goodness and types of things in this world that have good qualities and bad qualities. But to have this supreme spiritual science to understand these modes and how they're working was amazing to me. And I don't think there's any other tradition in the world that even touches on this topic for how this world works. So, and as I mentioned, Bhagavad Gita 14 in particular speaks about these three modes. So it says there in one of the most famous verses, 14:5, the material nature consists of these three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And when the eternal living entity comes into this material world, into contact with nature, Almighty Armed Arjuna, he becomes conditioned by these modes. So Krishna, speaking to Arjuna here, reminds us or teaches us that we're conditioned or controlled by these modes of material nature at work in the world. And everything in this world is part of one of these modes of material nature. One of the modes will predominate. Sometimes it's a mixture of the modes. But from everything you eat, to the things that you read, to the kind of friends you have, everything in this world is falling under these modes, or a mixture of these modes, down to the work that we do, to the thoughts that we have. And when we can begin to understand that, we can really navigate this world more successfully. We don't like to imagine that we are controlled by anything or conditioned by anything, but that's just a fact. And earlier, as I mentioned in chapter 3 of the Bhagavad Gita in verse 27, there Krishna says to Arjuna, all the activities in this world are carried out by these modes of material nature. But the bewildered soul thinks himself the doer. We convince ourselves that we are completely independent, that we are the true doers. But the fact is, moment by moment, we are being controlled by all kinds of energies around us. If you even just set aside spiritual forces in this world, just think about how seriously we are shaped by how we were raised by our parents or where we were raised. Do you ever find your mood affected by something as simple as the weather? Yeah, have you ever heard of something called, is it SAD? Seasonal affective disorder. I had that. So when I lived in Idaho, I had to keep like a special lamp in my house, in my office, to give me UV rays. So things like the weather can affect our moods. Not to mention lighting and music and certain kind of colors affect us. I think we recognize that certain kinds of foods can affect our modes. And don't get me started on social media, which seems directly ordered to keep us in a state of ignorance, doom scrolling through post after post, or getting this false sense of goodness by someone liking something we put up, or having our passions inflamed by some political statement that we see there that we may disagree with. So these modes, these energies, are operational everywhere. Let's talk a little bit about each of these modes in as much detail as we can in this short time together. So the first and lowest mode is called tamas. And if you think about this being like a rope, this is more like a kind of heavy, rusty chain. It's the rope of darkness and delusion. It's the I just can't be bothered mode of going through the world. And when we're in this mode, the characteristics we'll see manifested, or we'll see it in others, are things like laziness, intoxication, sleeping a lot. When we're in this mode, we seem to lose our intelligence and our spiritual clarity. We don't seem to have the ability to distinguish between what is real and unreal. And it often leads to activities that harm ourselves and others, things like addictions and intoxicants. So it's the kind of person you may meet who always sleeps in late. They spend hours of mindless time on social media. They're always complaining about everything. They seem to be kind of frozen in place. And Srila Prabhupada says in a purport in chapter 14 of the Bhagavad Gita that they almost become like a madman. They're full of addiction and illusion. They're stuck in a kind of inertia. It's hard for them to start anything. They're low energy. They're mentally foggy. They avoid things and procrastinate. Does that describe any of us? I think all of us can think at times of our life we might be operating in this mode. It's a very passive, unmotivated mode. And they don't even bother to inquire about spiritual things. It isn't even of interest to them. So when we find ourselves in this mode, when we engage in music and activities or foods that are in this mode of darkness or illusion or ignorance, it's pulling us down spiritually in the world. So we want to do our very best to avoid any kind of tamasic activities or objects in our life. The second mode is called rajas. It's the kind of fiery mode. So you can imagine it's kind of propelling us forward. This is a mode of constant activity, ambition. It's filled with hankering. It's like a caffeinated hamster on a wheel. You're always busy. You're always planning. You're always desiring more. And if you don't get what you want, you're angry, frustrated, miserable, and manipulative. Ever met anyone like that? Or maybe we found ourselves in that place sometimes. People just become a means to an end for you to get what you want. And you don't really appreciate people as spirit souls. So this mode is really the engine of modern society. If you think about Western culture, this is the mode that we're in. It's the driving consumerism, the hustle culture that we live in. And it corresponds to this endless pursuit of external validation from others and for material gain. And we'll never be satisfied because we have unlimited desires and longings when we're operating in this mode of passion or rajas. Now, the third mode sounds really quite nice. It's the mode of goodness. Sometimes it's called the golden handcuffs, or it's the beautiful silk rope that's pulling us here. It feels nice. You think, wow, this is great. I'm so happy. I'm so peaceful. I'm gaining so much knowledge. But do you think we could still be bound by even those kind of things? Yeah, we can become attached to material happiness. We can become attached to knowledge, to being a good person. And it's easy to want to stay in this mode because it's a place of contentment. And so Prabhupada warns us about this. He says being in the mode of goodness is like being in a golden cage. It's a really nice cage, but it's still a cage, and we want to be free of it. So what would be some examples of dangers, spiritual dangers for someone that's in the mode of goodness, where they're actually doing really good things? What can be spiritually dangerous about being in this mode, you think?
Become complacent.
Yeah, we can become complacent and content. We're satisfied with the status quo. Yeah.
You think you're better off than everybody else?
Yeah, we can start to become kind of self-righteous Everything's working out well for us. Life is peaceful. We've got a lot of knowledge. Yeah, Janish,
Kind of what Shureshwar said, ego, become egotistical.
yeah. If we're really self-righteous, or maybe we're eating this really clean diet, what are we going to start to do? We're going to look, oh, I'm so much better than this other person. Look how nicely I eat. Look how nicely I dress. Look how faithful I am. I'm one of the few people that come to this particular service or this particular meeting. So there's real spiritual dangers of being in this mode. It's a wonderful place to be because it's often a springboard for us to get to pure goodness, to the transcendental state to which we all want to reach, but it has its own set of dangers. Let's be honest, we don't need more good people in the world. We really need more surrendered souls in the world. We need more loving devotional service in the world, because sometimes religious people, can we agree, can sometimes be the scariest people you'll ever meet, or the most judgmental people that you meet. And they have no joy. They look like bulldogs baptized in lemon juice as they walk through the world. And then they wonder why no one wants to hear about their message or their particular religious viewpoint. So these modes act like lenses through which we can see the world. As we are controlled by these particular modes or mixtures of these modes, that's how we're going to move through the world. So we're either in a mixture of sattva, goodness. Remember, that's kind of marked by clarity and peace and knowledge and compassion. Rajas by activity and ambition and restlessness and longing, or tamas, laziness and delusion, intoxication. So what do we do? Is there any hope? Is there any solution to not being conditioned or controlled by these modes? And there is. The good news is there's something called bhakti yoga. There's loving devotional service is the key. And again, the Gita reminds us of this reality. One who engages in full devotional service unfailingly in all circumstances at once transcends the modes of material nature. So there is a way out. Now that's a pretty tall order, isn't it? But Prabhupada says that when you put, he gives this analogy, when you put iron into a fire, it becomes red hot. It's still iron, but it acts like fire. That is, if you touch that to a piece of paper or to someone's palm, it's going to do the same thing a flame would do. And similarly, he says, when a person fully engages in devotional service, they might be in a material body, but their consciousness is spiritualized. They act on a transcendental platform beyond the influence of these modes. But there aren't a lot of us that practice full, that's 100% devotional service, unfailingly in every circumstance. Is anyone doing that here? So the process has to be gradual. We have to learn the ropes in order to do this. So that's our aim. That's certainly to where we're headed. But we have to be actively engaged in untangling ourselves from these ropes over time. And it can be a gradual process. You remember the title of this presentation is Learning the Ropes. Does anyone know where that idiom comes from, learning the ropes?
Sailing.
Yes, from sailing, exactly. Sailing ships had hundreds of ropes or lines that were used to raise and lower the sails and to shift those sails. And if you didn't learn the ropes, you could easily tear a sail or send someone flying off of the rigging or actually capsize the entire vessel. So learning the ropes became an idiom to describe a person who is becoming aware of the forces that move upon us and mastering them instead of being controlled by them. So expert boatmen know how to use these ropes. Not only can we begin to transcend these modes, but we can start to use these modes. We can use something like rajas, which can drive us to get things done, even in devotional service. We've been reading through Prabhupada's Lilamrita, which is his authorized autobiography. And one of the things Prabhupada said there is that we're all on this little boat rocking, and there's all of these waves of material nature are coming at us. And he said the boat is being rocked, but he said you can learn to become an expert boatman in this material world. That even when the greatest storm comes, you can stay steady and steer that boat and it will not rock. And someone asked Prabhupada, well, how do we become an expert boatman? And he said, by becoming enthusiastic, sincere, confident, determined, and patient. So that's our engagement with these modes. And the more we can move into that mode of goodness, the better platform we have to return to Krishna, because Krishna is in a sense, the source of these energies. We've chosen to live in this world apart from him, but he wants to help us disentangle ourselves. So the moment we turn to him, Krishna provides us the grace we need to lift ourselves out of these modes of material nature so that we can be back home, back to Godhead. So how do we do this? Let me just give some tips in our final moments together. Number one is just being aware of the gunas, that they're operational in this world, puts you ahead of 99% of the people that are living in this world. People just don't understand how this world works. So that's the beginning of the process of lessening the influence of the modes upon you. It's just being aware that there's these frequencies at work in the world. And that consciousness can then lead us to the second tip, which is get some real clear-eyed self-awareness about how these modes are impacting you. How many of you are familiar with the 12 steps of recovery, like AA? Does anyone know what the fourth step is?
Moral inventory.
Exactly. Make a searching and fearless moral inventory. So this is being honest with yourself. Take some time over the next few weeks to maybe keep a journal and think about, what mode am I in when I'm waking up? What kind of activities am I doing at the beginning of the day? What kind of people am I spending time with? What kind of topics am I talking about with my coworkers around the water cooler? And get a real sense of how these modes might be working in your life. To go anywhere, you have to first know exactly where you are to begin with, right? If I'm lost in a city and I know I need to get to St. Louis, and I open up Google Maps, what do I need to put into that first field? Current location. So get a sense of where you are spiritually, already how these modes are working upon you. Thirdly, do regular mode check-ins throughout the day. Try to be a little bit more mindful before you eat something, before you act, before you speak. Just pause and take a moment and ask yourself, is this action or attitude coming from goodness, or passion, or ignorance? Where is my consciousness right now? Is this activity favorable or unfavorable to my spiritual life? Because that little pause is very powerful. Stephen Covey says in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is power, the power to choose our response. So even though we have all these influences and energies acting upon us, we can still make choices within this world. And that's the place of real growth and freedom. Fourthly, throughout your day, just look for ways you can add sincere devotional service to your daily life. Offer your work to God, even if that's a stack of invoices on the corner of your desk or a laundry basket full of dirty clothes. We can offer all of our work to the Lord. We can sing to the Lord throughout the day. We can offer our food to Krishna. Take up more devotional activities in your life to fill the gaps as you get rid of more activities that are passionate or activities of ignorance. So read spiritual literature. Every day, try to read a little bit from Srila Prabhupada's books. Chant the holy names. Listen to kirtans and classes from bona fide teachers. Offer your time, talent, and treasure to this temple community. Be more engaged in your service here. Take up association with other like-minded people that are serious about the spiritual life. And for teachers, approach teachers around you with humility that they can guide you. Now, the good news is where we all are right now, even though the modes are powerful, and Prabhupada calls them an infection, you need not be discouraged, because here's the good news. Tonight, you're in the hospital, and the doctor will see you now. The medicine and the treatment are free. Prabhupada has written you the prescription. So let us really begin to transcend these modes. And that's what we do when we gather every Sunday night. Let us take up this devotional service that will set us free with real sincerity of heart. Let us hear with attention. Let us praise with abandon. Let us associate with affection. Let us honor Christian prasadam with appreciation. And above all, let us take upon our tongues the great antidote of this age as we chant together, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I think I'm over by a couple minutes, but we'll stick around and hopefully continue this conversation as we continue to engage in all these activities tonight that will set us free. Thank you. Hare Krishna.